This is the story of a happily married couple, Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu, who together ruled Romania for nearly a quarter of a century. Romanians sarcastically called this socialism in one family. The concentration of power in their hands and the cult of personality which surrounded them was quite different from the other communist countries in Europe. Even the private lives of Romanians were targeted by the Ceausescus. Both contraception and abortion were banned. Any signs of rebellion or defiance were ruthlessly silenced. When communism collapsed, the Ceausescus were the only leaders to meet the fate of tyrants. Down one of the walkways in Bucharest's main cemetery is the modest resting place of the man who relentlessly molded the lives of a whole generation. In view of the hatred he inspired, it is perhaps surprising that his grave is well maintained, and that Ceausescu even inspires some respect 20 years later, for a few at least.
I come to Ceausescu's grave every Saturday because thanks to him, I have a house, I had a job, I didn't lack anything. It was inconceivable that I shouldn't have food on the table. Although I raised 2 children on my own, they had all they needed.
Ceausescu's popularity began here on the balcony of what was then the Communist Party headquarters. A few years after he came to power, Ceausescu had the courage to criticize the Soviet Union and the other satellite states for invading Czechoslovakia. Never before had a satellite leader criticized the Soviets so publicly.
Cetățeni ai țării românești, pătrunderea trupelor celor 5 țări socialiste în Ceoslovacia constituie o mare greșeală și o primejdie gravă pentru pacea în Europa, pentru soarta socialismului în lume.
By proclaiming Romania's independence from Soviet domination, Ceausescu aroused Romanian nationalism. Nicolae Melinescu was in the crowd.
It was a very emotional speech, and at that time, if Ceausescu came down into the street, he would have been regarded as a national hero, and I think people would have kissed him.
Ceausescu's popularity was to decline, but his power did not. Indeed, it grew, and was sustained by a cult of personality which had both narcissistic and monarchic overtones. As head of state, head of the armed forces, and head of the Communist Party, Ceausescu exercised incredible power. But it was a power he shared with his wife. It was a power which was used to interfere in any aspect of a citizen's life. And that even included intruding into the home life of a senior party man like Joe Pop. He and his wife Nadia were privileged enough to have their own movie camera and projector. The Pops already had the camera when their first child was born.
Her name is Indira.
We'd just come from the maternity ward.
These are her first days after we brought her home.
She was so pretty. Her eyes were so blue and a little red mouth. Here she was less than 2 weeks old.
As a party member, Joe should not have married Nadia at all. He was a communist and the son of a peasant. She was from the former ruling elite, and therefore a class enemy who had lost all privileges. From Nadia's point of view, marriage to Joe was a lifeline.
Because in those days, members of the Communist Party were the only people with a good future. They were among the few who could have a career, live a better life, and avoid doing manual work.
Joe and Nadia married secretly. There are no wedding pictures.
Din această cauză, după ce m-am însurat și am anunțat.
That's why after I got married and told them who I'd married, I had problems.
V-am povestit că am fost chemat la Comitetul Central de un secretar al Comitetului.
I was called to the Central Committee by a senior party figure who insulted me.
M-a insultat.
She asked me how I dared to marry without asking for their approval.
Să mă căsătoresc fără să le cer lor consimțământul.
Communists were atheists, so Joe should not have had his daughter baptized.
If they'd found out at work that we baptized our girl, they'd have fired my husband.
Their daughter was baptized secretly, and the celebration which followed was held away from prying eyes.
Este sărbătorirea botezului.
We celebrated at home because I had a high-ranking position in the party.
Eu având o muncă de răspundere pe acea vreme.
We couldn't celebrate publicly, for example in a restaurant or a church.
Nici la restaurant, nici la biserică, nici nicăieri.
Ceausescu celebrates the birth of the 20 millionth Romanian. He was obsessed with increasing the population to provide manpower for his new industries. So in 1966, he banned abortion for all women except for those who already had 4 children. Any mother caught having an abortion was jailed, as was the abortionist. These were serious penalties, as crucially, contraception was banned as well. One way to stop abortion was regularly to check all females of childbearing age to see if they were pregnant. This was done in some high schools. A very unworldly Daniela Dragici remembers the first time a gynecologist examined her.
We didn't really know what he wanted from us, but there were rumors going on, and we knew he was looking at a certain part of our body that no one had ever looked at before. We were scared. We were afraid of what they might say, they might write down after that kind of examination, of what they might tell our parents. We didn't even know how you got pregnant at that time. Maybe we had kissed, and maybe you could get pregnant like that. There were rumors that if you kissed, you could get pregnant.
But once she learned the facts of life, Daniela quickly learned what a nightmare the ban on abortion and contraception was.
You couldn't have fun having sex while you were afraid. Everybody was afraid, particularly the girls. The boys maybe didn't care that much. They were not the ones who would have to get an abortion, so they didn't really feel what we felt. The girls really were scared, and they were not confident at all, even when having sex, and withdrawal was the method, because we couldn't control it.
For most families, and particularly for poor couples like the Niagus who already had 3 children, Ceausescu's law was terrible.
He wanted people to have as many children as possible, to torment them because people had no means to raise them. There wasn't enough food, housing was scarce, and people lived 3 or 4 in one room.
Ceausescu later ruled that women working in factories should be inspected every month to see if they were pregnant, thus making abortions virtually impossible. Parascheva remembers the inspections.
I was ashamed, but what could I do? I was ordered to get undressed. The nurses were rude, and the doctor would shout too if he didn't like how I lay on the table, if it was difficult for him to examine me. The doctors were patronizing and put me down. They called me stupid. They told me I behaved as if I'd been